Welcome in.
What?
Hi, Phil.
Hello again.
The countdown got you thrown off a little bit.
A little bit. Are we oh, you know what? We just didn't talk about this. I wasn't sure if we were just going to be live and hang out for a second and then start the show. But I was supposed to go in with the lead in right there, wasn't I? Is that what's going on?
I never figured we'd start recording the pod yet. I always like to chit chat for a minute before
Oh,
we
good.
start.
So I assumed correctly. I was worried that was my cue for welcome.
Phil Barbier, thank you for noticing. Yes, it is a shorter countdown tonight. I was talking to Phil earlier about 15 seconds into that 1 minute long countdown last week. I told Stu in our group chat that I've made a huge mistake. And we had a good laugh when we came back. But, lesson learned. We're building upon ourselves. It's preseason mode for Flyover, just like it is for City. And all you can do is continue to get better. That's what we're doing. Phil's here for the first time of the year.
That's true.
Week 3.
I had to mentally prepare for the beginning of the race, the marathon.
It's a fun week, though. I mean, we were talking before we went live, Phil, that it's kind of a laid back week in the sense that the city's been gone all week, right? They're down in Florida having worse weather than we are here somehow. I don't know
hilarious.
how that happened, but and I looked at the weather forecast for when they come back on January 29th, and guess what happens like a day after they come back?
Snow.
There is snow in the forecast. I'm not even joking.
Something about what does that say about the season? Is that good or bad?
Hopefully it's too early for omens.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got a good show tonight. We've got City, a little bit of City news, not recent to our recording, but recent to our last show, I suppose. We'll go over some of the injury timelines to remind folks. We've got a look ahead to some preseason matches. That'll be nice. And a little bit on CITY2. We had a nice press conference today, and we'll see what David Critchley had to say, as well as talk to Brendan McSorley, who, I don't know if you saw that quote I put on their social media, Phil, but he laid it out on the line as far as what this means to him, which was pretty cool to see. And then
I didn't see the exact wording on that, actually, so I kind of browsed that article. So
he referenced this being, I'll mention it on the pod again. He referenced this for him being life or death, as far as he's put his heart and soul into revamping his body, training, trying to make the first team, knowing that he's got a CITY2 contract, but doing everything he can. So I everything I heard from him, I'm rooting for the kid. Like, how can you not at this point? And then we'll pivot over to the U.S. men's national team, talk about Indy for a little bit, who had an exciting week. And I think we're going to round it out tonight with a look at some new MLS roster rules that we didn't get to last week.
Big night. A lot of, some of our favorites are on the chat already tonight. So really,
I'm excited. We might only go 45. We're doing, we're going to send this one over to the Big 550 KTRS to air on the weekend. So we'll see how long Phil and I make it through. But, it's one of those things where there's a decent amount to talk about, but we're still, like, the team's been away for a week. The most content we've had from the team is cold training pictures and hugs from Indiana Vassilev type of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Ryan Fraley, I saw him at the Luligans AGM last week, and I am getting good mileage out of this hoodie. It's only the second time I've worn it. So, it's one of those things where it seems like I'm wearing it forever or a lot, but I haven't worn it since last Saturday. I promise.
It is pinker, isn't it? It's a lighter pink.
It is. It's lighter pink, and it has maroon. Like, this is legit maroon on it. There's a lot of speculation that this is, well, I guess less speculation, more slight confirmation now that this is going to mirror the new kit. We were talking about that last week, trying to speculate, and then like 12 hours later, the picture from the replica kit leaked from the store. Oh well.
Hopefully replica.
Yes. I still maintain there's absolutely zero chance of that being the actual authentic kit. It not only because it didn't have the patches, that was a dead giveaway to me. Didn't have the Apple and MLS patches and stuff.
Fair. Yeah.
It also didn't have that little tag that Adidas kits have on the bottom, like bottom left or right or something. So
you know what else is? I think I don't know if it's Jeremy Clements who's on right now, it looks like,
Mhm.
or someone else posted they were, like, playing around with Adidas templates
I think it
and
was Jeremy.
yeah, it was, like, a really clean photo of, like, the best he could do to remake it with a template on Adidas or whatever, and honestly, if I'm Seabeck right now, I'm pissed because someone released it in a way that was not flattering in any way, right?
Yeah.
And so, like the way Jeremy presented it, it looks pretty. It looks smooth, it looks clean, makes it look a
Yeah.
lot better than just sitting at a bad angle on a hanger with bad lighting. You know what I mean? I mean, it's awful to do that
I
to a club, to be honest.
I had a conversation with Matt Seebeck a couple years ago when City's kit was still coming out, had not yet been revealed, and you had some of those leaks just like this, where a retailer broke a street date. They put the replica kits because that's all they get. They put the replica kit of a team out, and it was a picture posted online of it hanging on a hanger with low light, and it was just boring. It was
Yeah.
plain, and he felt so bad about it. It wasn't like he was gloating over another team's leak or anything like that. He just felt bad because you don't get to control the narrative. Like, clubs like to tell their stories and make things mean certain things. Like, oh, these lines represent the lines that we're breaking down between, parts of our neighborhoods, like whatever things that they come across. But also, the kits, replica or authentic, just look different when they're on a model, when they're on a person, when they can control the lighting. And the thing that really sucks is first impressions are everything.
Yeah.
And City's first
Can't get it back.
impression, you can't get it back. Once it's out of the bottle, you cannot put it back in. And now, authentic or not, the first impression was a dud for City's
Yeah.
second ever home kit. And so now the club they're behind the eight ball in the sense that they have to try to recoup the goodwill type of thing. They have to not just create a splash, but they're fighting from. They've already had like to borrow American football phrase. They're already a 15-yard penalty behind. It's first and 25 instead of first and 10 as far as getting that ball across. And they've got a Herculean task ahead of them to try and convince folks that, or to try and sell the authentic as something so much better than the replica and make it look good, because now people have that replica, bad lighting on the hanger, and that's what's in their minds.
Yep. Well, Matt, should we kick it off? Now that we touched on something maybe we don't have to be dramatic about during the episode.
It's like last week. I had no intention of talking about the kit at all during the show, and we ended up spending the first like 10 minutes
A
on it.
lot,
So I'm
yeah.
glad we got that out of the way on the
Agree.
stream part of this. But yes, keep me in check, Phil.
But no,
I
I'm
go
ready to
crazy
go.
when you're
I'm
here.
excited.
I go crazy when you're here because I know you've got the reins.
I'm excited to we've got a good lineup today, good outline today. Thanks to Matt as always. So here we go. I'm gonna hit record and we'll go. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We have a preseason show for you tonight, and of course, I'm here, Phil Grooms, with Matt Baker. Matt, how's it going tonight?
It's been a long month this week, Phil. That's the best I could say. There's a lot going on, a little bit of soccer, enough for us to talk a lot about. So I'm excited for that.
Me too. Let's jump right in. You've got a great list, like I said today, and we're going to kick it off with the newest signing for the senior team, and that is Conrad Wallem, Norwegian midfielder. Asterisk. We'll touch on that a little bit more here in a second. But Matt, why don't you lead us into what we know about him?
Yeah, if you were listening to us last week, Stu and I basically broke this news. The smoke had been set during our live recording, but Conrad Wallem has been signed on loan from Slavia Prague. He is on loan with St. Louis City until the end of 2025 with an option to buy and will occupy an international roster slot. This was probably one of the final moves that Lutz is going to look to make, and I think probably the biggest remaining move that you can expect from the club. Lutz had said in the press release, a versatile player like Conrad who can play on both sides of the field will make us a better team. He is a talented player that was coveted by multiple teams in Europe because of his ability to play multiple positions. A dynamic player who can play wingback or winger will give us options within the team. He's a threat up high on the field and can be an asset to the defensive side of the ball. And from my understanding, the club views him as near DP value, both for the quality that he brings, the versatility, and just the overall what they think he can do in this system. So there's a lot to be excited about with Conrad Wallem. And as we touched on last week with Stu a little bit, there is this thing to watch about City with loanees, incoming loanees, where you've got Simon Betcher and Giannis Horn, both played big pieces down the stretch for St. Louis City, big parts of, and they had lots of minutes and they fit in well with the rest of the roster. So bringing in Conrad Wallem for just a 1-year loan with an option to buy, you can easily see how he could be a big part of this roster pretty quickly.
Matt, does bringing him in on a loan help the roster build in any way, or not really? Is it just similar to a signing?
I think in Conrad Wallem's case, bringing him out on loan was the only way we were going to be able to bring him in. I think the cost would have been too high with him under contract as it was to not just have the transfer fee, but also the salary. I think this was the only mechanism that Lutz had to bring him in, and they value him that highly. I don't necessarily think it has to do so much with the overall roster build, because if you've taken a peek at who St. Louis has up as far as contracts go at the end of 2025, it's almost half the roster. We're going to have big questions at the end of this full calendar year without getting ahead of ourselves. And I think Conrad Wallem could provide some stability going forward if he fits in this winger wingback type role.
Yeah. And again, no purchase, no transfer fee there. So, Lutz is working his magic, making sure we get players cheaper as far as the cap hit and things like that. So that's really nice. Conrad, no mention of center midfield, even though that's a thing he's played before. But one thing I just wanted to say real quick, and we can talk about that. Sorry, I lined it up wrong there. But he's the Champions Europa League player, right? Just like Totland. So, that Totland worked out so well. And I think we haven't even seen the best from him. And so this is and I've been seeing around MLS, this level of player coming in on really high GAM deals that are really going to help MLS teams, like role players on Europa League, Champions League teams. Slavia Prague played in the Champions League today. So good profile there, even though I don't know if you've talked about this a lot, but something weird happened. Like, he didn't get a lot of minutes. He had a lot of minutes, really great stats, and then not so much in this kind of half season here. So I hit a lot of things there, Matt. Please fill us in on some more, whatever your thoughts are.
Yeah, the lack of playing time this season, it's there are various rumors that abound about what caused that, but ultimately I think this is also one of those things where he could have been on the outs necessarily with Slavia Prague getting playing time, and so this was an opportunity for a club that saw a player that they might value or otherwise not have minutes. And so this was an opportunity. It works well for both teams from what I can see. Yeah, 12 Europa League matches, 1 goal, 2 assists in those. He's 24 years old, so he's right there in the prime of his career. And the flexibility gives you a lot of interesting options. We're going to talk about the roster here in a little bit, but you can easily see in a 3 center back look, Wallem fitting on the left side compared to Totland on the right. We know how Totland works. He likes to get high up the field. He kind of would be a ready-made wing back opposite of Wallem, and that leaves flexibility for, do you use Giannis Horn as a left center back? Do you run all three of Timo Baumgartel, Henry Kessler, and Joachim Nilsson? There's depth that this adds more so than just Wallem's flexibility. I think this unlocks a lot of potential in what St. Louis can do with a 3 center back look, or just, fitting in as a left winger. He could play higher up the field as well, left winger, left back, depending on the approach you need for your opposition. And if we've heard one thing, which we haven't heard a lot from Olaf Melberg so far, but if there's one consistent thing, it's his flexibility. He's really touting his desire to let the quality of the players and the opposition, the tactics that they need, drive and dictate the formations. And the flexibility Wallem gives us is going to help with that to a T.
Yeah, really good ball progressor. He reminds me of Yunus Musa. I keep saying that he is able to take the ball from the back all the way to the final third and get the ball to our playmakers. He's going to be good at that. He's very disruptive defensively. And playing on the wings, I would say a lot of his highlights for goal scoring or possibilities were him on the back post, playing wide and cutting in, being available for a cross, and also sending in crosses of his own. It looked like he was pretty quality in that way as well.
Yeah, last thing I'll probably say is, you mentioned a few minutes ago that the press release from the club didn't call out his availability in the midfield necessarily. He was really touting wing back or winger, but he can play in the midfield. He can play, I've heard, an attacking 6, so to speak, a box-to-box 8, even a 10. So there's versatility all over the field. And that doesn't just impact what we're going to see in a starting 11. That impacts his ability to stay on the field when we need to make other changes. If he's playing a left wing back or a left back role and we make a substitution where we need to take out Edu Leuven, Wallem might be able to slide right over there and you get in Giannis Horn or somebody on the left side. Like there's flexibility that this gives us that you might be hard pressed to find elsewhere on the team. And we have a lot of guys who are very flexible. Indiana Vassilev, Selio Pompeu, Tomas Ostrak, all those players who can play attacking mid wings in central midfield. Wallem might be even more so than that group.
I can't help but think about a game where I think Leuven was out for whatever reason and Hartle had to play as the dual pivot. And it wasn't bad, but we may prefer to see someone like Wallem in that role. So it's an option. Whether I'm right or wrong, it is an option. So here's a quick one. Selmir Pidro is on loan again, this time back to his home country, Velez Mostar. Matt, would you like to give us some more details on that?
Selmir Pidro is under contract with St. Louis through 2025, and he will not wear the St. Louis City kit again. We talked about this last year. It should not be a surprise that he was loaned out again. He's not in the club's plans. He was brought back from his original loan in Czechia, I believe, and he played for CITY2 at the end of last year.
Zlin.
So, yes, FK Zlin. And he didn't see a lot of time. It wasn't a productive loan, all things considered. And this is just the latest in that. You hope that by going to Bosnia, this is a home for him. He's able to find what he needs to succeed, similar to what Jabulu Blom is doing on loan for Kaiser Chiefs. This is something that we'll probably be monitoring Selmir Pidro, but he's not going to be coming back and playing for City. He's not in their plans. So we just wish him luck. The loan goes through the end of 2025. And then similar to last year, we expect he'll probably come back, see his contract out with CITY2.
All right. I wish him the best, of course. And hopefully he rediscovers his good form that he had when he was playing for Sarajevo. Let's talk about injury timelines, because these have gotten a little bit scrambled. And I think it's one of my top questions for preseason going into the regular season. How can we get these guys healthy and playing regular minutes for what we're expecting to be, these guys are going to be expected to run, right? So can they be ready for that, Matt? You have some clues to the timeline.
Yeah, those nonstop players that Olaf Melberg's looking to build, and it starts with the midfield, basically. Tomas Ostrak, one of the two big injuries from last year, Ostrak and Selio Pompeu. Ostrak is ahead of Pompeu in the timeline. Last week, we had a little backwards. We confirmed with the club that it's Tomas Ostrak that is said to join team activities in Florida. And if you've been watching the pictures and videos that City has released, you have seen Ostrak in his training clothes right alongside the team, joining the team activities in Florida. And we expect his timeline to progress from there. Do not expect to see Tomas Ostrak in the game against New England on Saturday, but he's with the team and he looks to probably see game time at Coachella in California. Selio Pompeu is a week or two behind Tomas Ostrak. As of a week or two ago, he was a week or two behind. So as long as there have been no setbacks, he is expected to join team activities in California. So a couple weeks behind Tomas Ostrak. Chris Durkin, another injury that we've been following since his knee issue last year with all that inflammation. Joining team activities in California is the plan for Chris Durkin, but he is targeting opening game. As of a week and a half ago, my understanding is that things were on track for Chris Durkin to be available against Colorado, that first home game on February 22nd. So we look forward to watching Chris Durkin's debut with the team in training when they're in California. And finally, Jake Girdwood-Reich, another midfielder, joined the team in St. Louis last Saturday and joined them in their flight to Florida. He's rehabbing after a surgical procedure of some kind to shave or lessen a little extra bone growth that was going on. It's not really an injury. It's a preventative measure, more or less. And so JGR is rehabbing that. We'll have to wait and see when he's able to take the field. That's part of the medical evaluation that they did since the last time we talked to the club. And he is with the club in Florida. And so we'll see when he's able to take the field.
Good stuff there. Durkin is one that I was, I think, the most nervous about because he covers so much ground and he's so important to Leuven's responsibilities on the field. But I would say it's STL Italians that got me. It is something I had considered, but really hadn't mentioned till he did. Said, do we need a 6 next to Leuven if we have 3 center backs? Something to ruminate on. I don't think now's the time to talk about it, but I wanted to make sure that was out in the ether for all you guys to start talking about and maybe throwing a fun little niche into your lineups as we post them for fun here in this season. That's one of my favorite things to do. And I looked for an excuse to do it just last week. I went out of my way to find an excuse to do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, or at least didn't hate it. Next section here, recapping the roster. This is massive. And Matt, this is your specialty. I'm going to learn something here. So Matt, please take it away with what that's looking like right now.
Yeah, this is important with the first match on Saturday. And just to get out in front of it, we don't believe the match is going to be streamed. So we'll have to follow along with anybody who might be on site or seeing what the club has posts after that. So I don't think it's going to be streamed at all. But the roster is pretty robust, and it includes 4 homegrowns, Tyson Pierce, Makai Joyner, Miguel Perez, and Caden Glover, all with the team now. Caden Glover, his time with the U.S. Youth National Team has ended. That camp is over, so he should be joining the club, and we expect him to be down there as well, right alongside Indiana Vassilev. There are 2 CITY2 players with the club currently, Cam Silly and Brendan McSorley, and all 3 super draft picks are with the club as well. That would be Emil Yaskalenin, Joey Zielinski, and Colin Welsh, a forward, defender, goalkeeper, respectively. Now, the super draft picks are not under contract with either City or CITY2, so it would not surprise me if we don't see names to those jerseys and we see trialists tossed around here and there. That's what they basically are. They're trialists to the team. Yaskalenin, I saw an image of him in one of the things that City posts, so I know he's there. We've seen Joey Zielinski a few times, both in St. Louis and in Florida. I saw Colin Welsh in St. Louis as well. So all of those guys are with the club, and we'll see how much time they play. That's the thing that I'm really looking forward to. Is most of the rest of the roster is known. Conrad Wallem had not joined the club when they went to Florida, and I haven't seen him. He's still getting the visa issues worked out, so I'm not sure. Haven't seen exactly when he's going to be with the club. But everybody else, you're looking at Berkey, Lunt, Oliveris from the keepers, Timo Baumgartel, Hebert, Giannis Horn, Henry Kessler, Joachim Nilsson, Thomas Totland, Michael Wenzel, Josh Yarrow, all the defenders, midfielders of Rasmus Alm. We mentioned Durkin and JGR, Marcel Hartl, Edu Leuven, Thomas Ostrak, Celio Pompeu, who's going to join the team activities in California, Seti Toyshirt, Indiana Vassilev just rejoined the club, and Akil Watts, Simon Betcher and Klaus up front, all the City signed guys we know. And now it becomes, what are we going to see in this first match? What formation is Olaf going to introduce for the players? Because we know, in talking to Olaf Melberg right before they left, I asked him, what's the plan for the tactics? And this club was first introduced to Olaf's tactical approach in a game-like manner the Saturday before they went to Florida. So last Saturday, they had a little scrimmage before they left. That was the first real tactical introduction, 11v11 for the club. Now they're in Florida. Now they have a match. What are we going to see? Are we going to see a 4-man backline with this roster to start? Are we going to see 3 in the back, center backs that is? And what are we going to hear about the pressing, the nonstop, how long guys are going to go? Are we going to see most of the guys go 45 and then swap out? Because that's the other expectation thing here. We should be excited that they're getting on the field for the first preseason game, but they're not going to go the full 90. They're not going to go 60 probably. These guys are getting their sea legs still. First competitive competition outside of the organization for 2025. There's plenty of more matches to get going before the season starts. 2 of the matches will be in Florida. We've got January 25th against the New England Revolution, and then January 25th, New England Revolution, and then January 29th against the New York Red Bulls. So those are the 2 matches in Florida, and I expect to see rotation, but what I'm going to watch for, Phil, isn't necessarily who goes how long, the rotations of who starts, who subs. It's going to be the smaller groups. If I remember one thing from last year, Lutz and Bradley Carnell at the beginning of last year talked about getting guys familiar with each other. And without hearing it from Olaf Melberg, that's one thing I'm going to watch for is the center back pairings, the midfield groups, the wingers, who the specific groups that need to function well together, gel together, find chemistry, specifically the center backs in particular. That who plays center back most often together is going to be a telling sign for me. We know a lot of these guys. I'd say if not more than half of the starting 11 is probably known. You're looking at Klaus, Marcel Hartl, Cedric Toyshirt, Edu Leuven, Chris Durkin once he's healthy. And then you could say Thomas Totland, and you might say that's it. Giannis Horn maybe on left back if you're looking at a 4-man back line, but I don't know who this top 2 center backs will be. Will Baumgart will be able to usurp Henry Kessler and Joachim Nilsson, because right now they could be the presumptive center back duo, but it's a brand new season, new head coach. They haven't shown him anything yet. Too early to be saying anybody's presumptive, except for those few players that I just mentioned, where they don't either, like Thomas Totland doesn't have competition for his job. Edu Leuven is DP quality. He's a TAM player now. Klaus is your out and out number 9 until Simon Betcher proves otherwise, I suppose, at this point. Marcel Hartl and Seti Toyshirt are a given.
Yeah, the striker, don't downplay the striker competition. I think a lot of people were pretty frustrated with, Klaus's lack of production, even though he was looking great, good form, doing the things he was expected to do, which is all Lutz said in the very first preseason anyway about our striker role anyway. So that's a fun one, though. I like that you mentioned that the center backs. I just wanted to say I did some research, and I can actually give you guys some facts and ideas here. The center backs, Kessler is the most valuable transfer market value, which is, whatever, but not much more so than Nilsson. Baumgartel, much lower than both of those as far as transfer market value. Again, that doesn't mean much. Salary, Kessler, Nilsson, very close. Again, we don't know what Baumgartel's getting quite yet, but that's something to watch for. I love that you're bringing that up. And the thing that I'm going to look up as far as interplay or who's playing where, the small groups, Matt, really good shout, is those ideas of who's going to play what side. Are we going to have 3 center backs, and are we going to have, looking at, who is Horn going to interchange with, what winger, or wing back is he going to be interchanging with? So that's going to be something I'm watching. Like, is Indy going to be left-footed on the left side, or is he going to look like what he did last year mostly, and what he did with the national team recently? Will Celio play left and high? Just things I'm looking for that'll be fun to watch for, Matt. Really good stuff there.
And honestly, the backups, seeing who wins out some of those backup spots, because you've got guys that are fighting for roster spots. We're going to talk about CITY2 here in a minute, but in the latest press release announcing CITY2's preseason schedule and roster, it was specified that after the Florida camp, there will be an evaluation done for the homegrown players, the CITY2 players, and the Super Draft players in particular. I called them out specifically because those are the ones that are in flux at this point. Technically, the homegrowns are on the roster, but they don't have roster spots with the first team locked up in preseason. They could go down, any one of them, go down to CITY2 if they're being looked at for a season-long loan, which City gets one of, or if they're just not ready and City doesn't feel like they've progressed enough. And we are watching for guys like Miguel Perez, because he's come back from loan from Birmingham Legion. He's with the club. We need to see where he shakes out. And these kinds of preseason matches where you're getting 45s and 45s is the perfect example. Does he come in and take Edu Leuven's spot? Does he come in and take the 6? Does he play out on the wing? Where is he slotted in when we're kind of doing this rotation? That storyline is, in these first few games, just as exciting to me as just the overall formation that Olaf decides to go to and those individual pairings. We're going to get a lot of information, I think, on some exciting things, like, will Tyson Pierce be that backup right back? Will Caden Glover just be slotted in there as Klaus's relief? Will he play more of a 10? Seeing where these homegrowns, because none of them have really had a chance to shine with City, that's going to be a very exciting thing under a brand new head coach.
You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you for joining us as we break down this roster. Just one more question for you, Matt, to dig a little deeper on this one. As you mentioned, there's 4 homegrowns. One can be loaned down for the season. We have CITY2 players with the team. We have draft picks. How many slots are kind of open? Let's say one of those homegrowns are loaned down. We have Jaskalainen that could be signed to the senior team or not. We have, the homegrown players, which can stay up, or one can open up a slot, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So anyway, what do we have to play with here? Zielinski could be a tweener, maybe, depending on how he performs at right back. But what do you think? How many slots do you think are up for grabs here?
One, basically. One,
wow.
Maybe 2.
Okay.
And that's sheer numbers. St. Louis City sits at, of the entire 30-man roster, we have 29 slots filled. with players contracted to City.
Yeah.
That doesn't count. That does count all 4 homegrowns. It does not count either City 2 or any super drafts. So the way that these could shake out are that we have one spot open, just one spot open for 5 of those players with City and camp, the two City 2 and the 3 super drafts. One slot open. We could send down one of the City 2 players like Miguel Perez or Tyson Pierce to a season-long loan. That would free up another roster slot, and so we could sign someone else. Uh, the thing that I think is the most likely to happen right now, if you say we're not going to send any of our homegrowns down for a season-long loan, we're not going to leverage that mechanism, then the front runner has to be Emil Yaskelenin, the first-round super draft pick, and it's because he hasn't been signed at all. So you have a little more. He could easily be slotted down at City 2, but if you're going to give him a shot right off the bat at a position that you probably can say is one of your top 2 that you need depth with, the striker position, then that seems just kind of like the no-brainer of the players available. Brendan McSorley, not discounting him at all, but he's signed to City 2. So there's a path for him to go play for City 2. And then we know from last year, you could be signed mid-season if you need, as any kind of things could happen. But unless City sells a player, transfers a player, loans a player out, or moves one to City 2 on the season-long loan, they just basically have one spot left.
I think you're dead on with, guys that are already on City 2. There's more flexibility with them. And so I'm with you. And when you look at the slot, the areas of a short depth, if someone gets injured, the easiest way for one of these guys to slot in is, to me, it'd be like one of the strikers going down, or literally any fullback going down, because you would have guys in the lower levels that could pop up on loans. And then if they have to sign to a senior contract, if the injury is bad enough, there's that injury loan possibility. And so guys like Tyler Pierce, did I get that name wrong? Tyson. My goodness, sorry. Tyson Pierce. We got Zelensky that could fill in that area, that could come up. Same for Glover or Yaskelenin, if he's not already signed to the senior team, could be loaned up in those situations. And the flexibility is big. So, as Matt touched on very nicely there. Anything else from you before we move on, Matt?
Now let's move on.
City 2 preseason news and notes. The biggest one that I think we all kind of argued, like, where's he going to go? Speaking of roster openings, is, I'm going to guess, Vassilev Orozco. That's my best guess, guys. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think I had the same pronunciation. Okay,
cool. But he was signed to City 2. We were like, where is he going to go on the senior team? What about Miggy Perez? All these questions. But Matt, what have you learned about Vassilev?
Yeah, so Vassilev Orozco was a rumored player coming to the City organization. Reports out of Fox Sports Mexico put him in with City. Manuel Veth, I had heard that wasn't happening to the first team. And so given his history with RSL, he's a defender, 20-year-old Mexican-American who had been a homegrown with RSL, gone through their academy, gone through the Real Monarchs, signed with RSL, played a handful of games for RSL, played more games with the Monarchs in, I think, MLS Next Pro at that time, and then was loaned out for a few loans. Now he's coming to us and with City 2. So he's kind of had a rocky road, so to speak, in finding footing in MLS. But he's got a lot of experience. Most recently, I think he won the Northern Ireland Premiership. Mm-hmm. So that's a notch in his belt. And he comes with upside. So he's signed through the end of this season, 2025, with an option. And we believe that option is for City 2. And so we'll see where he takes us. It's a chance to prove himself and earn a first team contract later on down the road. I think he's got a lot of upside. He's only 20 years old. And let's see, David Critchley, head coach of St. Louis City 2, said Vassilev is a composed defender with excellent game awareness and a fearless approach to defending. He possesses all the qualities we value: bravery, tactical intelligence, and technical ability. His experience at both the domestic and international level will bring a strong competitive edge to our team as we continue to build towards success. And yeah, he's played in loans with Santos Laguna in Liga MX, Larna FC in Northern Ireland, and he's accumulated 83 professional experiences so far in his career. Now he joins City 2 for the 2025 season.
Born in Mexico. I assume he's Mexican. I don't know about American heritage in any way. Do you, Matt?
I don't.
That'd be an interesting one. If he needs a green card, that could be a good way to kind of get that
I
clock
do think
running.
his international experience came with the U.S. youth national team, though.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Here's one that just came out today, and I haven't had time to study it, but we did talk about it. I'm going to steal one of your bullet points here because it was kind of the most interesting news to me that 10 of the 23 players that were announced today on the CITY2 preseason schedule and roster are academy players. So, Matt, fill us in on this because this is like, to me, we're looking at what CITY2 will look like from now on. It's been a little bit high-end reserve team until now, and now it looks like it's going to be just prepping kids for the first team at this point.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about MLS Next Pro contracts is there are two types of contracts in this league. One are professional contracts and one are amateur contracts. The professional contracts are for usually the players who either have pro experience or they're older, they've used up all of their amateur eligibility, or they have no need for it. They sign a professional contract, and they're pros. These are the players that City had signed previously, like Seth Antwi, Mateo Kidd, Juan Kuzain, Dita Armstrong, those kinds of things, where those are the pro contracts. MLS Next Pro has amateur contracts. The biggest thing for amateur contracts is that it allows the player to retain their eligibility for amateur events, college, namely.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen in the past with St. Louis City 2, especially guys like Fritz Vollmer, where they'll come up through the academy, they play for a UPSL side, they play for City 2 on an amateur contract for a summer or a little less than a summer, and then they go to college. And that's kind of where some of these players are going to go. You're not going to have 10 players play for City 2 on amateur contracts, and then they're all going to sign homegrown deals. That's not how this works. It is a method to get some of these younger players who may have graduated the U16, U17 level and shown real promise at those levels, additional experience. Namely, you can look to a couple players on the City 2 roster now, Emiliano Chavez and Lorenzo Cornelius, both who played at the U16 level recently and had experience now on the youth national team from the past year. Now they're playing for City 2 on likely amateur contracts. City doesn't put out the contract status anymore. I'm sure we could get it if we asked for it, but it's safe to say that the players on this level and the 10, let's go through the 10 real quick that we believe are on those amateur contracts or that have graduated directly from the academy this past season up to City 2. We've got goalkeeper Lucas McPartlin, the defenders Emiliano Chavez, Kai Yeager, Carr Nodal, Jackson McNeil, Nicholas Schramm, midfielders Braden Benier, Lorenzo Cornelius, forwards Eden Clark, and Ryan Dugan. That's a pretty hefty roster when you're talking about only 23 total players. And that 23 does include Brendan McSorley and Cam Seeley, who are both with St. Louis City. So there's a pretty good depth of players here, but a lot of really exciting opportunity. And this isn't even fully saying that those other 13 guys are coming from outside the organization. Nick Bishop, for instance, who is probably going to be the starting goalkeeper for City 2, came up through the academy and has been with City 2 for a year or two. So this is continuing the pipeline and continuing to give opportunities to the Chavezes and the Corneliuses and the Shrams of the world, who we watched them play at the U17, the UPSL level. I think Nick Schramm even might have scored a goal, if I recall correctly, in the UPSL semis, quarterfinals last year. I remember watching that one on stream, but exciting times to see these guys move up to the next level. Really, showing promise to the concept of what City 2 and Next Pro is supposed to be, this pathway to the pros, linking the academy to the first team. And it goes along with what David Critchley told us on Thursday. He spoke with the media when I asked him about balancing some of those things. Justin Horniker and I had the opportunity to ask him along with Tom Timmerman from the Post-Dispatch. And he had a lot of good things to say about his mindset of developing players and winning, that if you develop properly and you do a good job, then the winning will come. And he's had proven success, David Critchley, the new City 2 head coach, at the U16 and U17 levels in this organization. He's worked his way up the ladder after coming over from England, just like a lot of these players have. And he has so much familiarity that is very exciting to see implemented at this level now.
I really enjoyed City 2 under Murphy last year, and that is exactly, I feel like, what encapsulates what he was doing last year. And so I look forward to more of that from Critchley. I'm sure he'll put his own spin on it, but I love what he's been saying about how he's going to set up City 2 this year. Only thing I want to say about that is Even if these guys don't get homegrown contracts, they may go to college, and we can still bring them back. Fritz Vollmer is at Northwest. We have Jackson Delkus at SLU. These are guys that can come back, and I think if they're on a certain list, they might even qualify to sign homegrown contracts before the Super Draft. Is that still a thing, Matt?
We would still have their rights, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that's something we can get more specific on in the future when it comes up. But anyway, that's such a cool wrinkle in our format now here in St. Louis. We are Flyover Footy. This is our first episode, and so I want to say, if you're listening to us on the big 550 KTRS, we are a soccer podcast. We cover mostly St. Louis City, and we dig in deep with statistics. We get pretty nerdy. We go pretty crazy with what the setup might be. We give you previews of games on Saturdays is mostly when they come out. The shows come out right before the game. So we can prepare you for the weekend, but we could also kind of educate you if you're just a casual soccer fan, but you want to get a little crazier with your knowledge level. You want to know some tips on what to look for in the City game, especially Matt Baker here, my buddy, is really good at letting you guys know those kinds of things. So check us out. Look us up online on any social, wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to extra footage as well that is in addition to what you hear here on the radio on the big 550 KTRS. Please check us out. We appreciate it if you do so. Matt, we got one more section here, and that is to talk about some roster rules. And this is going to be a fun one. Speaking of getting knowledge out to the masses, this is an area where we have to constantly study because MLS is always evolving. And we have a new release of several rules that we're going to touch on. Some easy, some crazy.
I didn't want to interrupt you right there. I know you were on an absolute roll, but I do want to get in the Indiana Vassilev shout before we do this.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Really quick. Indiana Vassilev, kudos. He played in 2 matches for the U.S. men's national team this week. Played 13 minutes in reserve against Venezuela, 3-1 win, and started and played 69 minutes in a 3-0 win against Costa Rica. Indiana Vassilev was the representative for St. Louis City in, as what we affectionately refer to it as, Camp Cupcake. It's not the first choice roster for the U.S. men's national team. If you're not familiar with the national team mechanisms, January camp usually comes from MLS. Last year, AZL Jackson was called up from City. Didn't really see much action, but Indiana Vassilev seems like he's gaining favor with Mauricio Pochettino. And he played a wide right midfielder. He inverted in the attack. He had good defensive link up. His stats were good. He wasn't setting the world on fire. He's not going to legitimately push a Timothy Weah for a roster slot, for instance, but he did what he needed to do to put himself in contention for camps like this. Indiana Vassilev, I think he's 23 years old only, and this is a good jump up from him after making the Olympic national team roster camp before the Olympics and not really featuring at all. This was good for Indy, and he clearly had fun. He's back with camp now, but just like I mentioned, Caden Glover earlier, who's in camp with the U20s, who played Nashville on January 18th in a scrimmage. Indiana Vassilev had a great week with the U.S. men's national team. Had to point that out before we get into our last section.
Yeah, Matt, as a host, I feel like I scored a goal in preseason there and it was ruled offside. I was like, man, I just rolled that.
I felt so bad.
That's on me. Preseason form. But yeah, just a few things about Indy. Pochettino, the Mauricio Pochettino, was extremely complimentary of Indy in the presser before the game, before the first game even, and more so than I expected. And take it with a grain of salt, of course. But I think the way that Mauricio Pochettino talks about the practical things he wants to see from this team, because he gives them a lot of freedom, is the stuff like transition soccer. Not only are we able to counter, is something that Indy Vassilev is good at. Not only do they expect to press vigorously, is another thing Indy is good at, but also repressing. If they lose the ball, they want to get it back. The competition to win. These are all things that Indy, we know he has it, right? And on top of that, his performance in the second game that he started against Costa Rica, he wasn't always looking for the easy pass. He was very trustworthy on the ball. He didn't lose it very often. And he would find, it'd be like ping, ping, ping close by in your rondo. And then he'd be like, no, screw this. Let's do something different. And he would send it somewhere further, a little more creative than some of the other guys in certain aspects. And some of my favorite passes from him were one-touch passes in behind. He did a really good job with that several times. He was always crashing the box, almost scored on one of those. He was in a good spot for a cross or a corner. I forget what it is. So he got in scoring positions, didn't score. He tried to pull a Jack McGlynn early on in the game, and
He did.
it didn't work out for him. So Indy is what he is, but we love him, and we think he has the talent to get somewhere someday. You can't rule that out with him only being like 23, right?
Exactly. And with a new coach like this, everybody's looking to prove themselves. Tim Ream said it during their first camp last year with Poch, that this is fresh for everyone. And it's a really good step for Indy to take to have performed like this.
Okay. So cut what I said earlier, paste right here, Matt. Let's talk about roster rules.
Let's talk about roster rules. So, and this we almost got to last week, but let's run through it. MLS introduced several updates to the league's roster rules and regulations ahead of this coming season. All of these updates are effective immediately. Number one, cash for player trades. Number two, there's a second contract buyout available to teams. Number three, GAM now has more defined expiration dates. Number four, off-roster homegrown changes have occurred that gives teams a little extra flexibility to players classified as off-roster homegrowns. Number five, outgoing designated player loans will now have extra meaning for clubs. There's extra benefits we'll get to in a second. And number six, the roster construction model declaration, the dates have changed along with the transfer windows. And so this impacts the number of DPs and U22s a team can have. So let's circle back and go into each one of these briefly, but detailed so we understand what they mean and what they mean for City. Cash for player trades. This is introducing the internal transfer market into MLS from just straight up cash. Previously, players could only be traded within teams in MLS through GAM. You had to trade GAM to acquire a player. This doesn't change any underlying things as far as who the contract lies with. The player's contract is still with the league, and the teams basically operate those contracts. Now, teams can trade cash to acquire a player's services, still with the contract through the league. So that means that while the player can go from St. Louis to Nashville or Nashville to St. Louis from just cash, the player's status will not change. So if the player is a DP, then the team pays cash and they acquire him. That player is still a DP for the length of the contract. They cannot do anything with that. So the parameters of this are that clubs will be allowed to acquire up to 2 players, and they'll be allowed to trade away up to 2 players per year for cash. Similar to transfer fees, clubs can convert the revenue generated by these trades to general allocation money. There's a maximum per year that teams can convert $3 million of transfer fee cash into general allocation money. Just means they have more of the MLS type money to spend and use all kinds of different ways that we've talked about before. Cash spent to acquire a player via trade will be applied to the player's salary budget charge, meaning that this is like a transfer fee. So the reason that Klaus cannot be bought down from his DP status is because of what his transfer fee was. This is the same way. If you acquire a TAM level player, let's say Edu Leuven is transferred to the Seattle Sounders for $1 million in cash. Edu Leuven would now be a designated player and unable to be bought down because you add that $1 million over the life of his contract. That's what that means, basically. So the other parameter is when utilizing cash to acquire a player via trade, no other forms of compensation may be included. So we're talking straight up cash. We're not talking cash plus GAM plus an international slot. We're talking just straight up cash. And the last piece is that if a player is acquired via the cash trade and they occupy a DP or a U22 slot, then that player must remain as a DP or U22 on the club's new roster during the guaranteed term of the contract. They can't be bought down. The U22 initiative stays, all that good stuff. So it makes it a little easier to understand in that regard that there's no wiggle room for it. But this is truly groundbreaking stuff. And honestly, the 2 biggest names that have come from this so far that everybody's watching for are Evander from Portland and Lucho Acosta from FC Cincinnati. Both of them are DP number 10s. And the reason that it's exciting and worth monitoring where they go, these are going to set the market. Right now, there's no market value for any of these players internally to MLS. Once you have a DP10 being sold for $5 million, you've just set something to mark yourselves off of. You can say that if Evander's sold for $5 million, Edu Leuven would be sold for, X number less than that because you value Leuven in reference to Evander, or you sign a player from like Ilie Sanchez or whoever from another team. That's why it's important to watch these 2 players and what the first moves are from this cash, because we'll know we'll now have an idea of what to measure that off of.
Yeah, keep going, Matt. Second contract buyout is a big help for a lot of teams out there.
It is. And when we talked to Henry Kessler about this a couple weeks ago when this was first announced, he actually made note of this one thing. So teams previously had only been able to have one contract buyout, meaning whatever a player's contract is, DP or otherwise, years, it doesn't matter. They can just buy you out of that contract and they're free of the contract. They can only do that for one player per year. Now, it doesn't change the fact that the buyouts are at the club's expense. So you still have to pay that player what their guaranteed contract is worth. And you're out that money, but the player's off your books. You're freeing up from what that player was doing. So it's usually a high value player who's underperforming significantly, and you need to clear that spot to correct some roster building issues. Clubs now have 2 of these guaranteed contract buyouts per season. They can be conducted in season or during the off season. And if it's conducted in season, it has to be done by the end of the secondary transfer window. So by the end of August, this will not be in effect anymore. So 2 to watch. See, it's worth watching to see what teams make move of this. And the third one, GAM expiration dates. Basically, just MLS has eliminated expiration dates for GAM under all circumstances, basically. Apart from GAM received as part of a club's decision to opt into the U22 initiative player model. So GAM received under the U22 initiative player model must be used within the same league season and by the roster freeze date. I'll probably touch on this in a minute, but there are 2 roster construction types that you could opt into now that were introduced last season. One is the DP model, one is the U22 model. The U22 model says you can have 2 designated players, 4 U22 players, and you get $2 million in GAM. And so this is just saying that apart from that kind of a thing to opt into the U22 model, then none of it expires. That's pretty simple. Number 4 is a little bit up in the air, I think, maybe even as far as we understand it, Phil, because you had a different interpretation of what I did. It's the off-roster homegrown changes. MLS has altered the parameters for off-roster homegrown players, providing them more opportunity for those younger players in league matches. This was Tyson Pierce last year. Tyson Pierce was an off-roster homegrown player on a season-long loan to CITY2. So when MLS says off-roster homegrown changes, I think of the specific designation that Tyson Pierce had last year. And there are people on social media, some very respected people, who think this means potential homegrown players who have not yet signed homegrown deals at the U17, U18 level, the CITY2 amateur contracts. I don't have that interpretation yet. I think it's specific off-roster homegrown designations like Tyson Pierce last year.
Typically one player.
Yes. And the benefit to that now is that this one player or this off-roster homegrown is now eligible to appear in up to 6 MLS league matches, along with unlimited first-team appearances in cup competitions, including Champions Cup, Leagues Cup, Open Cup, the Canadian Championship, friendlies, etc. And previously, the off-roster homegrown players were only eligible for the regular short-term loan affiliate agreements, those 4 short-term loans per year that we saw City take advantage of. The player must be 21 years or younger during the calendar year. Once a club moves an off-roster homegrown player to the senior supplementals, the player may not revert back to an off-roster. So if they recall him from off-roster, they can't go back and forth. But once down at that off-roster homegrown designation, which they are transparent about, we will know if City has an off-roster homegrown designation before the season starts, then that player applies to these specific changes.
It's massive for one player. I got really angry that there wasn't something like this in the new rules. And then I got excited when someone showed me that there is something like this. And then after Matt talked to me, I realized that it's not doing anything that I was hoping for. We don't have time to talk about it now. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about in this regard. It's really awesome for that one player. It needs to happen more for all reserve players, but there are reasons it's not going to happen, and we'll talk about it another time. What about outgoing designated player loans, Matt?
Yeah, so previously only young designated players and U22 initiative player slots were eligible to open up due to a player being loaned out. If you loaned a designated player, then you were still taking up a DP slot. It didn't really give you any relief to loan out a DP player. Now, if an international club absorbs a DP's entire salary during the loan period, the MLS side that does that sends out that player, opens up a new DP slot. So this is meaningful if you're looking to loan out a DP player and you come into an agreement with another team that they're going to pay for his salary that causes him to be a DP player, basically. This will apply after a player's first season on an MLS roster. So in year 2 or later of that contract, The player must occupy a DP slot at the time of the loan, or if it occurs in the offseason, the player must have concluded the prior year as a DP. This will give teams a lot more flexibility in what they do with their DPs if they can come to an agreement with another team for a loan and getting some kind of roster relief for them. And speaking of rosters, the roster construction model declaration is the last thing. So dates are going to be important here. Teams have to declare a roster construction model by the roster compliance date on February 21st, which is a Friday this year. Clubs will conditionally have the opportunity to update their roster construction model at midseason between July 1st and the end of the secondary transfer window on August 21st. So City will go into the season as of Friday, February 21st, declaring one of two roster construction models. Like I mentioned, the U22 initiative model, which looks at 2 designated players plus 4 DP players, up 2 DP players plus 4 U22 players, plus $2 million in GAM, or a DP model, which looks at 3 designated players, 2 U22s, and no GAM. When you update that mid-season, that's basically if you need to get rid or you transfer out a DP, then you can switch from having 3 to 2. If you buy down a DP, you can move. Being able to change this mid-season gives clubs more flexibility to make these mid-season acquisitions that are going to impact your team. You can acquire DPs, U22s, without having to say you're going into the season this way and you're stuck for the entire season. That's massive for City because Lutz does his work in the summer, as we all know. So this gives what we see at the beginning of the season is how we go into the season, but it can and will change because of this mid-season.
All right. Friday, February 21st. Hear that, Miami? That's no mistakes this year. Okay. And the only other thing I wanted to say about the designated player loan, just to reiterate, I know you said it, but just like make sure everybody knows, the international club absorbs the designated player's entire salary. If they take the whole salary, then they're forgiven that amount of money on the roster. So it's a hard sell, right? They got to pay the entire salary.
It is, but a valuable player who's just not working out, or I mean, we know players in clubs butt heads all the time. So this could be one of those.
Listen, Driussi, MLS, he's one example, but there's a few in this offseason here that some clubs have been bailed out by South American clubs with more money and more roster freedom. So good for them. You know, you can get bailed out, and Lutz has been good at it as well in the past. So not a bad thing. Matt, thank you so much for digging into those. Anything you want to say before we go?
No, I'm excited to see what happens on Saturday. We'll be gleaning as much information as we can. Whatever we find, we'll share. Don't look for it to be streamed, but we'll try to get whatever information we can out to you. And it's exciting to have matches occur, preseason or otherwise.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Really fun stuff in the chat. And thanks for listening tonight. If you are listening, if you're on the radio for the first time, again, check us out, Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Thank you again for listening. We'll be talking to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Go City.